Hi, this is Jack Finley. I've put together this calculator to assist in determining what the gaps are between the performance of the different funds that you're evaluating. It's not perfect. I've worked on it for quite a while, so if you see any errors, please contact me. And if you have any ideas or would like help in modifying this workbook, please give me a holler and I'll help you do that. First thing I want to show you is the List of Funds tab. It's just simple Excel. I use this to record which funds I'm looking at, and of course I save this workbook by the name of the 401k plan or retirement plan that I'm evaluating. Of course, in this case, I've already got some data entered here, and we'll just use this as examples. This is a particular 401k plan, which shall remain nameless. Copied this off of the documentation and just put it in here. Now, by getting in the tickers in this column here, and I was able to record values, of course, which is just for reference. By copying this column and doing columns to rows and paste it in horizontally. And then this right here equals all of these cells with a comma between them, and this is just copy and paste values. So the reason this is useful is I can copy this cell now, and you can do this any way you like, but the efficiency here is that when we go into the tools, you can generate the first search page with all of the funds that you have listed on that tab. So you could also manually type in all of these with commas in between them. I find that if I mess up and happen to close this tab, or as a matter of record, it's nice to have this here as a stable list and be able to reference it and do other things with it in Excel. So here we've got our list of funds. Now in the Excel sheet, the next tab you'll see is Roll-Up Report. This is a tab I built which summarizes all of the cells from the previous tabs. Right now, of course, there's nothing to reference, and I don't want you to get confused with this, but it is a way to generate the aggregate results of the entire plan. If you've got some Excel experience, you can easily see how I did that in the cells, averaging all of the returns and risk factors throughout all the tabs, but of course it has to be manually referenced, so it's pretty laborious, but ultimately it can do all the math for you, aggregating all the results, average results across the fund. So moving to the last tab here, what I'm going to show is how to get data in here. Notice that it's only 10 funds. Of course, the tool itself, you can go up to 50 funds. It also has 3 return columns, 3 risk columns, and 3 miscellaneous columns. Now the reason this is important is for the use of the calculator. Obviously these are static. This is a static calculator. If I wanted to add another, let's say add 20-year return on here, or 1-year return, it doesn't matter what return it is, but add another return factor or another risk factor or multiple additional miscellaneous factors, then we've got to add those columns. And rather than have a whole large spreadsheet, which would be very hard to look at and contemplate every factor, I built this with 3 of each. I'd be glad to help expand it to whatever dimensions you want, but I'll demonstrate here what the basics are of this, and you can see how we can imagine a calculator with different columns. So if we go to the tool here, and I'm just going to jump to this tab right here. Now you can see that I've got just 10 funds listed here. It's important to note, for the sake of the calculator, that sometimes the index or the choice, your choice that's in the fund, might show up in the top 10, in which case, let me see if this happens here. Yeah, so here, so notice here on this tab that the Vanguard Target Retirement 2035 shows up as number 3, so you've got one less row at the bottom. I'll show you how to mitigate that in the spreadsheet itself. Okay, so once you've generated your results, which notice here, well, this one is not ready, so what I'll do is go in and eliminate a couple of columns, and I only want 3 return miscellaneous columns. Okay, so I've got 3 of each in the calculator, and now my results are showing 3 each here. And of course, it'll be important for you to determine which factors you need to look at for the investment statement policy statement for this specific fund. In this case, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index is showing up 118 out of 646. So the way to get this data into the spreadsheet is fairly simple. You just have to start with the cursor before the R on the word rank in the upper left and drag all the way down to the end of the score number, and this is basic copy and paste, Control C. Go back to your calculator and place the cursor in the rank cell and Control V, and notice that forgive me, do not Control V. You want to paste values only so that the conditional formatting setup remains. Alright, so you can see here right off the bat there's red to green. Green is good, red is bad. I shouldn't say that it's not explicit, because sometimes there's very little difference between these things. So notice that your choice, the Vanguard, happened to copy in to the actual choice row, and the index copied into the index row. If our search results do not look like that, we're going to go here and we see that I'm going to take this one as an example. Again, we're going to copy from the R down through the final score. Go back to the spreadsheet and you'll notice how this does not line up quite so nicely. So the color formatting here is choice, which is yellow. The Morningstar is not the choice. So we go back here, the Vanguard number 3 is the choice and Morningstar is the index. So select the actual fund, which shows up in the top 10, your choice. Copy that and paste the contents, or paste the values only, into row 18. Now the Morningstar Lifetime 2035 shows up in row 15, which is number 11. We want to also copy that and paste the values only into row 19. This changes the wording here. We want to make sure this is the same. Now that we have these two rows established, row 18 and 19, we can correct rows 15 and 16 without losing our data. Again, we're going to paste values only for both of those. Once we get the choice, your Vanguard, into the right rows and the index into the right rows, then you'll see that the conditional formatting changes as those positions change. So that does feel a bit arduous, but it's simple copy and paste and making sure the data is in the right place, and it does all the math for us. So I'm going to return to the previous fund. Here, the Fidelity Contra Fund, and go through that once more. Return to the rank cell and paste values. This just so happens the choice and index line up in rows 15 and 16. So to finish the calculator, we'll copy those rows and paste them into these cells, rows 18 and 19, which is where some of the calculations below are based on. Now row 20 is possibly best. As we look at this field out here, you're seeing that there's the Barron Partners, for example, ranked number 9, has the darkest greens, but it also has the darkest reds. So now this particular fund, what is the investment policy for this? Is this too much risk for the investment policy statement? That's the question to ask. So perhaps Barron Fund Partners Retail here is the best because it has by far the greatest return in this asset class. It has so much return just in the last 3 years. It has over 30% greater return than the Fidelity. Well, our goal is here with this choosing this asset class is to have the greatest returns possible, and not necessarily with the lowest risk. We're talking about 3 and 5 and 10-year returns. This Barron fund far outpaces the choice of the Fidelity fund. Up here we've got a little better risk on the T row price. We've got some better miscellaneous factors on the Invesco, but we've got a modicum, as you can see through the yellows and oranges, a modicum of returns and risk, all average. If we go back to our results and look at the chart, we can see that both the index and the choice and a majority of all of these funds in this asset class are mediocre and average. So I'm going to say, for the sake of discussion here, that this Barron Partners was clearly the best because of the returns over the last 10 years every year. So what we do is we paste the values of that into the possibly best row here, row 20. So you can see that autofills in these calculators below, and this is where all the calculations take place. So this conditional formatting helps us see right off the bat visually what might be the best fund, possibly best in this asset class over the time periods that we're looking at. And we get these into the right rows, and it's doing the conditional formatting. We can see that the index would have been a far better choice than this Fidelity Contra fund in this case. Now if we scroll down to the calculators, what I've got in here is the top 10 and top 5 means as a matter of comparison. Double click on the cell and you can see that it's averaging the top 5 in that asset class, or in that time column, and then with the 10-year top 10 mean also. So this is taking the percentage returns as a matter of reference for the subsequent calculations. This is bringing in the actual returns from the top 1 on this rank. You can see 2694, the possibly best, which we chose as the Barron Partners. Then taking the top 5 and 10 means, as well as bringing in the benchmark, and then our choice here, which is the Fidelity Contra fund. It's automatically filling this data and calculating it. Now this is where the calculations take place to look at performance gaps. We can see that the percentage return gap from choice, that anything in the positive is positive returns over what the choice is. The Fidelity fund, of course, is 0, and just about everything above it that we've measured here in this sheet is better than the Fidelity fund in terms of percentage return gap. I've also calculated percentage return gap from the benchmark. So this is taking all of the same percentages and calculating the gap to the benchmark. In this case, the Fidelity fund underperformed the benchmark. The 3, 5, and 10-year time periods, the benchmark, of course, is sitting at 0, and our possibly best regularly outperformed the benchmark in this asset class. A couple things I want to point out here is that it's important to check that your conditional formatting is set up right, and of course this needs to go by column. Now in this case we are taking the entire 3-year returns here, going to conditional formatting, we're doing color scales, and the very first selection is highest is best. And that'll be the case across returns. Now in the case of risk, which here I've got deviation calculated, we want to go to conditional formatting, color scales, and the second choice is green is the lowest. We do want lower standard deviations. Assets under management would be a highest is best. Expense ratio would be a lowest is best. Conditional formatting and sharps would be highest is best as well. So it's important to keep an eye on that. Make sure that when you paste in your data, it doesn't either delete or overwrite the conditional formatting. And if you have any doubts as to whether for example, sharps is conditional formatted to the right scale, you can just check that formatting again here. So I hope that's not too long-winded. This has taken a couple years to get to this point. Went through quite a few different iterations. I hope you find this to be useful. If you conceive of any other useful calculations that we can display in this, feel free to shoot your ideas over to me, your questions, or if you notice any errors. Thank you for taking the time to learn how to use this calculator. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at jack@decisionengines.tech.